Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley says no more than 1,500 Barbadians will be going home under its restructuring program with the IMF. Holders of government paper vote to give Barbados a fresh start in its debt exchange program. And in sports, the West Indies lose the two-test series against world number 1, India.
Credible, balanced, committed. This is the CBC Evening News.
And a very good evening to you. I'm Sophia Alsop, Cambridge, with this Sunday, October 14th edition of the CBC Evening News. In our top story tonight, no more than 1,500 Barbadians will be going home as part of government's restructuring exercise over the next few weeks. In a live address to the nation from Milaro Court this afternoon, Prime Minister Mia Amor Motley said 80% of those workers are temporary. Flanked by Attorney General Dale Marshall, the Prime Minister gave the assurance that government will not be sending home people without money in their hands and will be offering packages wherever possible.
Those severance-type packages will also be buttressed by payment in lieu of notice. 3, that without prejudice to that in some instances that there is vacation pay due to officers on an individual level. And above all else, 4, I have insisted, and my cabinet has agreed with me, that the day on which persons receive notice, unlike what has happened before, they must walk home with a check, at least dealing with the severance type payments and indeed the notice and indeed the termination. Why? Because none of us would feel good having to go home without knowing where money is coming from and who is going to help us tomorrow, or to come back next week or next month and be begging for money. And at the very least, if we're going to do this, we have to do it properly.
And Ms. Motley says the soon-to-be-established Household Mitigation Unit will be critical to ensuring that no one falls below the minimum standard of living. She says option forms will be given to those affected, asking them to indicate what their passions are and whether they want to be retrained in line with the proposed affirmative action program.
Do they want access to a quarter acre of land, and do they want us to help them establish a greenhouse so that they can get into some type of farming? Or are they interested in livestock farming that we can help them with? We are also going to amend the laws to be able to allow for an affirmative action program up to 20% of the value of government's goods and services. Right now, we spend about $400 million a year procuring goods and services. 20% of that is $80 million a year. That is more than 4 times the cost of the separation package that we will face in the next few weeks for central government, and indeed is an amount that can be shared with both existing providers of services, or if there are groups of people who have been laid off who can, for example, come together and want to be able to provide government with services or goods that we are now currently sending to others overseas or to entities so large that the adjustment in business will not hurt them, then we are prepared to listen.
And government has received an overwhelming level of support for its debt exchange program, which has given Barbados a chance to start afresh. Prime Minister Motley says all of the banks, insurance companies and 99% of pensioners have voted in favour of the program. She says this represents about $11.9 billion in domestic debt and arrears.
This is an extraordinary position, particularly since we know that everyone who voted yes for this domestic debt exchange effectively voted to cut some of the income that they would otherwise have been entitled to. I feel particularly honored and humbled to lead a country at this time in the global affairs of our global affairs that would see both individuals and institutions recognize that we have a common path forward, and that what was required was for us to identify that common path and to allow this country to be able to be moved back onto a path of stability.
Well, noting that pensioners were hit particularly hard, Prime Minister Motley says she should be able to address their particular needs within the next few weeks. On the subject of the country's external debt, she says meetings are continuing, with some scheduled to begin as early as this week.
Once this is behind us, then we will be in a position to advise the country what will be the savings both in interest and in terms of principal that will allow us to move forward with certainty.
Well, as the island deals with an apparent increase in gun violence, prison officers are being told that they have a role to play in national security. The Minister of Home Affairs, Edmund Hinkson, says prison officers are a crucial link between current and former inmates and can help in reducing the risk of people reoffending.
You must be commended for the service you have given to our island. This is also an opportune moment for you to reflect on those persons in your charge and to adopt a humane approach to them with a view to preparing them for life after their release from DODS. You need to encourage them, as your mission statement emphasizes, to lead law-abiding and useful lives, both while in custody and after their release.
Minister Hinkson was speaking during the Barbados Prison Service Church Service and Parade at the Breath of Life Seventh-day Adventist Church recently. He again called on society and families to give ex-inmates a second chance.
Prospective employers need to give former skilled inmates a chance to be gainfully employed. This is an issue in Barbados, of course, especially as it relates to the need to produce a certificate of character for about 85 to 90% of the jobs in Barbados. Relatives ought to provide them with a warm and supportive home environment. The wider society needs to be more forgiving and compassionate.
Well, a government minister has hinted at the need for policies to make healthy foods more affordable. The Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Indar Ware, made the comments during a church service at the St. Martin's Anglican Church. The service began celebrations ahead of World Food Day, which will be observed on Tuesday of this week. Minister Ware says attention must be paid not only to how much food Barbados produces, but to the quality of that food. He says this is especially so since the ultimate goal is to develop healthy, well-nourished citizens.
While some people may be getting too little food, others are getting too much of the wrong food. We know that often the nutritional quality and value of food are reflected in the price of the food, thereby putting commodities out of the reach of poor people. This means that there is a need for interventions to improve affordability. Thus, the links between agriculture and health must be meshed to enable us, a government, to make the policies and programs necessary to achieve food security and promote sustainable agriculture.
Well, figures from the Food and Agricultural Organization, the FAO, estimate that 815 million people go to bed hungry across the globe every night, and more than 99 million children under the age of 5 are undernourished and underweight. Well, the umbrella body for credit unions and cooperatives is calling for a dedicated seat at the social partnership table. President of the Barbados Cooperative and Credit Union League, Anderson Henry, made the appeal as the organization celebrates its 60th anniversary.
Given the very large contingency that we represent, we are of the firm view that the movement should be represented in the reconfigured social partnership in its own right. The time has come for this to be a reality. We should no longer have to depend on the goodwill of organizations to be seated.
Well, Mr. Henry was speaking during an anniversary dinner and awards gala last evening. He wants the new administration to create credit union-specific legislation, as he says the current legislation passed in the 1950s is outdated. He also wants government to create access to deposit insurance safety nets to protect the more than 200,000 credit union members in Barbados.
We at the League have been lobbying hard for this since 2010. It's about time the 210,000 plus credit union members receive the same level of protection as that enjoyed by customers of the commercial banks, financial companies, etc. We are calling on the new administration to make this a priority.
Well, news for students and staff at the Lester Vaughan School now. The Lester Vaughan School at Cane Garden in St. Thomas will remain closed for this week. The Ministry of Education has said that this is to allow for the necessary environmental remediation to take place at the school. The ministry apologizes to all for any inconvenience caused.